Mean if riboflavin is causing your pee to be bright neon yellow? That's the question we're going to be answering today. And I'm going to answer this real quickly. So anyone who wants to ask additional questions that are very related to the topic, I guess the boundaries of that would be anything about riboflavin, can ask your question in live chat. And when I'm done answering this question, I'll go answer those ones. I'm not a doctor. This is not medical advice. If you'd like to support my work, please see the description or my first comment in the chat, or go to chrismasterjohnphd.com/support, which will continue making it possible for me to do these things. So picking one question from YouTube today, I'll share my screen. And Robo asks, on the video, riboflavin supplements free B2 is better than FMN or riboflavin 5-phosphate. Robo asks, if I'm pissing out bright orange pee, I'm absorbing it, am I not? And so that's the question that I'm going to answer today. So there's a real short answer to this question. It shouldn't be orange. It should be more like neon yellow. So I'm going to assume that that's what that was. Of course, everybody might see colors a little bit differently, but riboflavin carries a neon yellow color. And if you're observing that in your pee, then that's riboflavin in your pee. So quite simply put, it's not even possible that you wouldn't be absorbing the riboflavin if it's winding up in your urine. And so that's the end of it. But a few other comments could be made. So some related questions might be, does that mean you're taking too much? Well, not really, because, well, actually, and then another question would be, does that mean I'm not retaining the riboflavin? Because obviously the urine isn't where you want it to wind up. And so those are related questions, but basically, it can't be possible at all that if it's winding up in your pee, you are straight up not absorbing it. It could be possible that you're absorbing it and it's not really getting into your cells adequately to do its job, and it's all winding up in the urine, but that's rather unlikely. And I wouldn't consider that to be the case unless you had markers of riboflavin status that were, and there are rare defects in riboflavin transporters that lead to very severe disease that require high doses of riboflavin that would absolutely turn your pee lots of neon yellow in order to get anything done to treat the disease. But those are extremely rare. So in most cases, if it's getting into your urine and turning your urine bright yellow, yes, that means you're absorbing it. No, it does not mean you're taking too much. And the reason it doesn't mean you're taking too much is that what it does mean is that you're crossing the threshold required to excrete it. That really just means that your plasma levels are raising above a certain level where some of it slips into the urine. That doesn't mean that any dose above that is all going to go into the urine. It just means that, once you get past that point, you will sort of have a linear or semi-linear increase in the degree to which your pee is neon yellow above that point, but you're still getting more riboflavin into your system. And there's still more to get into your cells. And so if you do have some kind of reason that you need to go above and beyond normal food concentrations of riboflavin, which don't typically turn your pee neon yellow, in order to get some benefit of riboflavin, it's totally plausible that you would need even more than that, because just because you've crossed the threshold that some of the riboflavin is going into your urine does not mean you crossed the threshold beyond which all of the extra riboflavin would be going into your urine. Now, it's conceivable that if it's going into your urine, you still might not be absorbing it adequately into your cells. Highly unlikely, but the evidence of that would be that functional markers of riboflavin status, so erythrocyte glutathione reductase, or how do they abbreviate that? HDRI, European Laboratory of Nutrients, is the only place I think you can get that in the United States. And it's on the requisition form, it's EGR, erythrocyte glutathione reductase. I think it's EGR. It's something like that. It might be EGRA or something like that. But anyway, that's the best functional marker of riboflavin status. But also, if you look at LabCorp whole blood riboflavin, that should give you a pretty good index because most riboflavin in whole blood is actually activated riboflavin inside your blood cells. And so, if your pee is neon yellow, even if it's not getting into your cells, you would probably have low whole blood riboflavin. On the other hand, I would absolutely, totally not use Quest's plasma riboflavin because that does not reflect the riboflavin that's getting activated inside your cells and would not be a good index of anything except how much riboflavin you recently took. And in fact, if your pee's neon yellow and the Quest plasma riboflavin is, it would almost certainly be high. It seems it would be utterly impossible for it not to be high if your pee is neon yellow, because the pee being neon yellow is reflecting the high plasma level, which means nothing about it getting into your cells. So I wouldn't even get that test ever. But then the question, of course, is, is your dosing regimen adequate to proportionally get more riboflavin into your cells where it's supposed to do its job rather than into your pee? And in that sense, I would say the best ways to do that would be, first of all, to spread the riboflavin dose out. So it would be better to take, if you were on high dose riboflavin, it would be better to take 100 milligrams 4 times a day than it would be to take 400 milligrams once a day. And actually, the studies that have been done suggest that somewhere between like 25 and 60 milligrams of riboflavin, you start saturating the transporters. So you will get more than that into the system. It just won't be that efficient. But it's impractical to try to dose that around the exact point of maximal efficiency. If you're trying to do that, you should probably take like 25 milligrams spaced out evenly across the day. But to try to get 400 milligrams in 25 milligram doses in a day, I think I wouldn't want to do that. So I think it would be adequate to just sort of like get a 100 milligram capsule and take one with each meal and one before bed. And then you should hit 4 doses if you're eating 3 meals a day. You want to make sure your magnesium status is good. Anything that could be interfering with energy metabolism could interfere with ATP, magnesium ATP, activating it inside the cell, which will retain it in the cell. And if you don't have good magnesium status and you have any kind of energy metabolism problem, that's going to wind up making you pee out more than you're activating and retaining. And so those would be the top things to look at in terms of trying to direct it into your cells to be activated rather than into your urine. But the fact that it is in your urine, simply put, means yes, you did absorb it. It doesn't tell you anything about how well you were retaining it. And it doesn't tell you anything about whether you're taking too much. Great. Danelle says, what about red pee? Well, I'm not prepared to talk about that, so it's a little bit off topic, and I'm not sure all the different reasons for that, but that might mean you have blood in your urine, or it might mean you have some other pigment in your urine. I don't, off the top of my head, I don't know what can turn urine red besides blood, but I would imagine that heme byproducts could possibly. So I would definitely talk to a doctor about that. NAP says the only time I've had neon pee is with a multi. Well, yeah, it's because the multi has high dose riboflavin in it. That's what's turning your pee neon. So Nam Rofney says, hi, is it okay to take choline bitartrate with DIM? When I take them together, I feel off weird. Is it because it's working well? That also is off topic. I'm going to stick to riboflavin today, but I wouldn't take choline bitartrate at all because it doesn't fit into one of the major forms of choline that's particularly good for something, which is alpha GPC to boost acetylcholine, TMG, which is not a form of choline but is closely related to support methylation, phosphatidylcholine to support cell membrane health, liver health, and gallbladder health. So there's no particular reason to take choline bitartrate besides that it's cheap and convenient, but it does raise TMAO way more than any other, way more than any food form does, particularly tested against phosphatidylcholine. And I, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm about a 3 concerned with TMAO. So I'm not super concerned with it, but I wouldn't intentionally tenfold increase my TMAO over, for no extra benefit by taking a free choline salt. Great Danelle says, if you eat a lot of beets and take a lot of riboflavin, will your pee be neon orange? I have no idea. I've never had beets turn my pee a particular color, but I suppose if you I suppose if you mixed yellow and red, it would be orange. Seems right. Chris sees Fox says DIM turns pee red. Okay, well, if that's true, then taking it with riboflavin would turn pee orange, I guess. EL Aaron says, is R5P better than plain B2? No. And the reason is that riboflavin 5-phosphate. So there deserves to be some controversy over this, but conventional wisdom is that the high alkaline phosphatase activity in the intestine will thoroughly dephosphorylate anything, and that will be necessary for its absorption. So that would suggest that riboflavin 5-phosphate would be just turned into riboflavin in the gut and absorbed as riboflavin, and that if you had low alkaline phosphatase activity in the intestine, that you would not dephosphorylate it, but you also wouldn't absorb it, because as a phosphate compounds don't cross the intestinal barrier. Now, that's the conventional wisdom, but as I pointed out in a very long form pantothenic acid podcast, I believe it was split up into 2 parts, but you can search for that on YouTube or on my website. It was more recently shown that 4-phosphopantothene, which also is a phosphate, does cross the gut, contrary to conventional wisdom that phosphate compounds don't cross the gut. So there's room for some controversy over that. The case for taking riboflavin 5-phosphate, if it does get absorbed, would be, as I said before, if you have a problem with energy metabolism, then you'll be less good at phosphorylating riboflavin, because to do so is dependent on magnesium and ATP. And there is evidence that riboflavin is less phosphorylated in adrenal insufficiency and hypothyroidism, which, intuitively might lead you to say you should take riboflavin 5-phosphate in those cases. But should you? Because you might not be absorbing the riboflavin 5-phosphate. So I don't know. I would err on the side of saying that it's probably a bad idea to take R5P unless you are, which is riboflavin 5-phosphate, unless you are testing your riboflavin status to ensure that it's working. But there's an argument for it, but I think the argument against it, which is that you either would turn it into riboflavin or you wouldn't absorb it, is sort of a little bit more powerful than that you should. Of course, if you wanted to play both sides, you could always take both, in which case, if you benefited from one more than the other, you would benefit from that one and you wouldn't know the difference, but at least you'd be covering both your bases. Paralysis by analysis says, I've heard riboflavin helps cut down on the fishy body odor caused by TMAO. The fishy body odor is not caused by TMAO. It's caused by TMA. And riboflavin is needed for the enzyme that converts TMA to TMAO. And so by converting it to TMAO, you get rid of the odor, but you get the TMAO, which the Cleveland Clinic thinks contributes to heart disease, which I said before, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm a 3 in my concern. And so I'm not very convinced. But it's the trade-off of getting rid of the fishy body odor is that you are creating TMAO, which theoretically is linked to cardiovascular disease. Theoretically. No Slouch says, my pee tastes orange. I didn't know that orange, the color, had a flavor, and interesting. I'm not going to comment on the rest. Charlotte Simpson Parnell says, my urine, I assume, turns bright yellow after my weekly liver, 6 ounces. I've added it in the last few months and consume it once a week. Have low energy and possible methylation issues. Trying to get magnesium status up with mineral drops daily. Have had issues with getting my mag up in the past. Yeah, I mean, so liver is very good source of riboflavin, but it's nowhere near high enough that I would expect it to turn your pee yellow. So I think that's a great example of what I was saying before, of one possibility is that your pee is turning yellow, in this case on a dose that shouldn't turn your pee yellow because you're not retaining it in your cells. So you are absorbing it through the intestines, but it's sort of passing through you because it's not being retained by the cells due to your low, presumably low ATP levels or low magnesium levels. Although if you're not retaining the magnesium, that might be because your ATP levels are low, because magnesium, one of the main things it's going to do is chelate with ATP. And if it's not bound to ATP, if you don't have enough ATP to bind the magnesium, then the magnesium is not going to be retained. But you might have some vicious cycles here, because if you're not retaining the magnesium, then you're whatever to whatever degree low ATP is causing you to have low riboflavin retention is going to be aggravated by the fact that the magnesium also is not there. And magnesium also is needed to make ATP in other ways. So I guess that you're going to have to find the root cause of that. I can definitely say that insulin and salt and B6 can all help with magnesium retention. So you might want to look at those. You might need more carbohydrate, more calories, more B6. But if you have adrenal insufficiency or you have hypothyroidism, that's going to compromise your ATP levels. If you have a metabolic disorder, it's going to compromise your ATP levels. If you have a deficiency of one of the other, 20 or so odd nutrients involved in ATP production, that could be at the root cause. So I can't unravel that here, but that calls for some testing and figuring out what the root cause is to try to address as close to the root cause as you can, to bring your ATP levels up and retain those nutrients. Barbie Pagliarini Heffernan says, what are the benefits of riboflavin? I'm not going to go into that here, but I have a very long riboflavin podcast. Search YouTube or my website, chrismasterjohnphd.com, where you can find all about it. I also have probably a dozen short little clips on benefits of riboflavin. Real quickly, riboflavin is necessary for energy metabolism. It's especially necessary for fat burning. It's necessary for methylation. And if you don't have enough riboflavin, energy metabolism and methylation are certainly going to go down the tubes, which is going to cause all kinds of problems. Riboflavin is also needed to retain iron and needed to prevent anemia too. But there's lots more. Cute. Anonymous says, my pee looks like a glow stick from my B complex. That's the riboflavin. E.L. Aaron says, how can we support the incorporation of B2 into riboproteins? Primarily by supporting magnesium ATP status. Protein says, is taking a single B vitamin by itself risking balance of all the other B vitamins? Yes, but the evidence is kind of poor, and so there's definitely some risk of it, but it's really hard to say what that risk is and how concerned you should be about it. But in general, I don't think you should go above food dosing of vitamins unless you need to. And I don't think you should supplement with a single nutrient instead of getting nutrients from food unless you need to. So it depends. If you have a riboflavin transporter defect and you need to take 1,500 milligrams of riboflavin a day to get any into your cells, then my concern is not going to be about the balance with other B vitamins, because you have a very specific need to take riboflavin. So yeah, the risk is there, but you manage that by not, mega dosing one single nutrient unless you need to. Okay, just looking through for some other good questions that are relevant. Charlotte Simpson Parnell added, great, thanks for directing me into some avenues. I hadn't considered that the riboflavin wasn't getting into the cell until you mentioned it just now. Would make sense why I still have migraines, why migraines are still an issue. Yeah, although in the studies to treat migraines, it requires 200 to 400 milligrams of riboflavin a day. So if you're using riboflavin to treat migraines, you may well need a high dose. E.L. Aaron says, do you know of metabolic functions of B2 other than coenzyme ones? For example, antioxidant, anti-infective, etc. I would be deeply, completely, totally skeptical that any such functions that were hypothesized in literature would actually be relevant in vivo, on the basis that free riboflavin is very rapidly cleared from the body, hence the neon yellow P when you megadose it. And so in theory, riboflavin could act as an antioxidant, not as in a non-coenzyme form. But generally, if you ever see anything that's hypothesized as an antioxidant in the literature based on its free non-enzymatic function, you should be deeply, deeply skeptical of the relevance of that in vivo. For example, the tens of thousands of studies on polyphenol antioxidant function are almost entirely wholly irrelevant from human or animal physiology, on the basis that we don't absorb them in anywhere near the dose it would take for them to act that way in cells. When we do absorb them, they are almost exclusively appearing as conjugated detoxification products because we remove them as toxins, and their effects are almost entirely mediated by gene expression rather than some direct antioxidant effect. So riboflavin is absolutely an antioxidant because it's a cofactor for glutathione reductase. Riboflavin is, of course, is going to be absolutely essential for immune function because, among other reasons, it's a cofactor for glutathione reductase. An antioxidant activity in that form is absolutely essential to immune function to protect immune cells from the oxidative burst that they use to destroy pathogens within the phagosome. So, MD says, damn, Master John wiping out the entire herbal supplement industry. I'm not wiping out the entire herbal supplement industry. Many of these herbs have value as gene expression modulators. I'm just wiping out the terrible science of pouring something on a cell and showing it acting as an antioxidant and claiming that that has any relation to what goes in the body. So, for example, Wyman's Blueberries has the ORAC score of their blueberries on the back of their package, which is absolutely stupid. But that doesn't mean I won't eat Wyman's Blueberries. They happen to be really good blueberries. But the ORAC score of a food is stupid to even measure because, you crushing up a bunch of blueberries and dumping them into some system where you show their ability to directly quench an oxidant that you poured onto that system, it has no relationship whatsoever to how that's going to function in the antioxidant system in the body. But I believe wild blueberries are good for you, and I'm still going to eat Wyman's. I'm not eating them right now, but I have in the past, and they're great. So I'm not wiping out any industry. It's just the what happens in vitro doesn't necessarily translate to what happens in physiology, and you have to use what you know about how physiology functions to interpret the in vitro research. So with the antioxidant field, we now have more than a decade of science arguing that polyphenols are generally acting on gene expression rather than acting as direct antioxidants. That's all. All right, looks like that's all for today. So I'm going to get back to work, and it was great seeing you guys, and hopefully I'll be able to do this tomorrow too. Take care, guys.